Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. South Africa is going through years, the preparation for the election that's to take place there on the 14th, that's going to take place there on the 29th of May, in just about 7 weeks from now. It is interesting to note how much the South Africans themselves, those who are given the responsibility for organizing the election, and the participants are committed to making sure that the elections are free, fair, and credible. And it is even more interesting to note how much they take pride in being able to hold free, fair, and credible elections. South Africa has held elections for the last 30 years. And in those 30 years, there's never been one election where the results were disputed. That's how good the democratic institutions have been. And I am really impressed by the way they take pride in that. I think they fully appreciate what an important step in the right direction that is, to hold free, fair, and credible elections, so that the party that emerges at the end of the day has the confidence to say we have the mandate to govern the country. And that mandate came from no one else other than the people of South Africa in a free, fair, and credible election process. That is something to be applauded. Let's just listen to the commission announcing, going through the gears of the election process.
I have a group of people that are still not going to do. The Electoral Commission is going to brief the nation on our state of readiness for delivering the elections on the 29th of May. Secondly, we are going to take you through the process for designing the ballot paper, and we are going to familiarize the nation with the thinking behind the design of the ballot paper. We are going to have a draw, which is going to determine who is going to be the party or the independent that is going to occupy the first spot on the ballot paper. Thirdly, we are going to invite political contestants to pledge to the Electoral Code of Conduct. They will be given just under 2 minutes to pledge to the code. I'm going to repeat that. Representatives of political parties will have less than 2 minutes to pledge to the code. I implore you, representatives of political parties, not to use this moment for political campaigning. If you do, we are going to be here for the whole day, and please don't make me suffer that injustice. So less than 2 minutes, you will pledge your support as required by law to the Code of Conduct. With those few remarks, may I invite all of you to please stand as we sing the national anthem of South Africa.
I will not take you through the national anthem. I'll just go past it and go to what the I think is the chairperson of the Election Commission, outlining some of the things that the commission is doing.
Code of conduct reinforces democratic values such as tolerance, respect for diversity, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. These values are essential for the functioning of a healthy democracy and the fostering of trust between citizens and their elected representatives. We know that political violence and intimidation can undermine the integrity of the electoral process and deter citizens from exercising their right to vote. By complying with this code, political parties and the candidates help prevent such incidents and contribute to a peaceful electoral environment that is conducive for the holding of these elections. The Electoral Code of Conduct also aims to ensure that all political parties and candidates have equal opportunity to campaign and to communicate their messages to voters. Violations of the code, such as unfair campaign practices or discriminatory behavior, can distort the electoral playing field and undermine the principles of equality in the electoral process. Adhering to the provisions of the Code of Conduct demonstrates respect for the rule of law and the authority of the electoral stakeholders, and particularly the institutions conducting elections. It reinforces the principle that all actors in the electoral process, including political parties, are bound by legal standards and are accountable for all of their actions. The conduct of all contestants has a direct bearing on the legitimacy of election results. Violations of the Electoral Code of Conduct can cast doubt on the legitimacy of election results and lead to disputes and legal challenges. This is something we've got to be circumspect about. By complying with the code, political parties help ensure that election outcomes are accepted as legitimate by all stakeholders, thereby contributing to political stability and cohesion in our land. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the rule of law is essential for the functioning of a democratic society, as it ensures equality, protects rights, limits government power as may be necessary, provides legal certainty, facilitates access to justice, preserves democracy, and promotes social cohesion. It is a fundamental pillar upon which democratic governance is built, serving to uphold the principles of justice, accountability, and the rule of law.
I'll stop there. The commitment of the South Africans to free, fair, and credible elections is really something that we in Zimbabwe, particularly, should look at very, very seriously. South Africa has had the misfortune, if you want, of having a really corrupt and incompetent ANC government. But no one can dispute that it was the people of South Africa themselves who have elected the ANC leaders these last 30 years. No one could dispute that because the elections were free, fair, and credible. And therefore then, as much as the country has suffered because of the ANC misrule, the electorate themselves can only say, we have got ourselves to blame for it. And the beauty of upholding free, fair, and credible elections is that if once the electorate realizes they made a mistake, they can put it right. They have got the power in their hands to put it right. And that is one of the things that is so important, and why it is so important to have free, fair, and credible elections. What the chairperson went on to explain are some of the things that we in Zimbabwe would have gone green with envy. The South African Election Commission have managed to produce a verified voters' roll. Nobody in the past has ever disputed the voters' roll. Ever since they managed to produce it, I think they produced it for 1999 elections. They kept it up to date, informed the electorate how you can update your information on the voters' roll. Those who have never voted for the first time, how they could be added in. And the voters' roll has been available to all stakeholders to participate throughout that process. And for this election, they have produced a verified voters' roll. We in Zimbabwe, that is news. That is something that we have never had. A verified voters' roll. Never. We've never had a verified voters' roll in Zimbabwe. Our voters' roll has always been fluid. Before, when it was being handled by Dede and these merry men and women, you could never see what was on the voters' roll. It was subject to being changed. When it was handed over, the production of the verified voters roll was handed over to the Zimbabwe Election Commission, things have not improved either. Those of us who have been following Zimbabwe elections would tell you of Tim Pachedu's work in that area. Some of the blatant errors that they found in the voters' roll. And they literally begged ZEC to put those errors right and to produce a verified voters' roll. And they were ignored. South Africa's Election Commission has produced a system that allows South Africans outside South Africa to vote. The process is in place. So South Africans in the diaspora will be able to vote. Again, a rare thing for people of Zimbabwe. Ironically, Zimbabwe has got more Zimbabweans outside Zimbabwe than most other countries in terms of percentage of the electorate. And yet the regime has stubbornly refused, has stubbornly denied Zimbabweans in the diaspora the vote. It's given one excuse after another. I say excuse because it is a feeble excuse. In June 2021, Patrick Chamisa, as a spokesperson of Zanu PF, said that they were not going to allow people in Zimbabweans in the diaspora the right to vote because Zanu PF is under sanctions and they will not be allowed to travel to campaign for the votes for those people in the diaspora to support, to vote for Zanu PF. Let's be very clear on that point. The sanctions were imposed by Western countries like the USA, Australia, the European Union, and a few other countries in the West. South Africa, Botswana, any of the African countries, in fact, never imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. And yet, Zanu PF was denying this in the diaspora the vote. Zanu PF was free to travel to South Africa, Botswana, and all these other countries just as freely as MDC, CCC were. So why was it that Zimbabweans in the SADC region, for instance, were denied the vote? There's absolutely no reason for it. The truth of the matter is Zanu PF would have found it very difficult to rig the vote outside Zimbabwe, intimidate the electorate outside Zimbabwe. It's easier to do it with Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe. That is the only reason. It is interesting to note here that last year's elections were judged by SADC election observers, the AU election observers, and Zimbabwe's own Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission as having been flawed and illegal. Those are outside bodies who judge the process to be flawed and illegal. It is interesting to note that the opposition have been participating in these flawed and illegal elections time and time again, even when they knew that the process is flawed. They still participated. We should be in no doubt at all that the opposition have played their role, their part in denying the people of Zimbabwe a meaningful vote in Zimbabwean elections. They have knowingly participated in flawed and illegal elections. I have quoted on similar platforms David Coulthard, what he admitted in his book regarding this very point. And I'll quote it again for those of you who did not see the initial comment. This was David Coulthard soon after the 2013 elections. In the book that he wrote. In it, he admits that the electoral process in Zimbabwe was flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw, which would have compelled SADC to hold Zanu PF to account. But such was the distrust between MDC T standing for Trangirai, and MDC-N, N standing for Welshman Ncube, that neither would withdraw for the fear that the other would remain in the elections, winning the seats and giving the process credibility. And by all of them remaining, of course, they gave the process credibility. But when you look at it, look at that statement, one is going to ask, so what was the reason for participating to win the seats that they knew, both sides knew that Zanu PF was giving away a few seats to bribe the opposition to participate. And they both stayed for the sake of those few gravy train seats. This has been at the heart of the Zimbabwe's flawed and illegal election processes, where the opposition have been participating in flawed elections because of out of greed. There was no other logical explanation for it. In last year's election, even after SADC and the AU election observers had condemned the process as being flawed and illegal, Chamisa and friends still took up their few gravy train seats. Their argument was, oh, these are liberated zones. We've got to hang on to them. In other words, they argued that those areas that the opposition had won the seats, the elections were free, fair, and credible, which was, of course, nonsense. I stated here earlier on that ZEC had failed to produce a verified voters roll. A verified voters roll affected everybody across the country, those in the urban centers and those in the rural areas. How can you have a free, fair, and credible election when you do not even have something as basic as a verified voters roll? The truth of the matter is, and unfortunately, the most Zimbabweans have been slow to realize that, is that the opposition in Zimbabwe has been the opposition in name only. In reality, they have been Zanu PF Team B. They've been participating in these flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy, or as David Coulthard would put it in this quotation here, giving the process credibility, knowingly. And their reward was the few seats, few gravy train seats. I am impressed with South Africa. Those of you who get a chance, I'll strongly recommend that you have a chance to listen and try to follow what is happening in South Africa. Listen to what the commission was saying in full, because there's a lot to be learned here. I am so glad that South Africans have managed to keep their institutions clean. The police, the army, the judiciary, the media, they have had problems with state capture in South Africa. I'm sure many of you would have heard of the Gupta state capture, and how the Gupta brothers cooperated with the former South African President Jacob Zuma in looting. But the ANC government has never been able to corrupt the country's state institutions. like the police, ZEC, the army, the media, the judiciary. That has got to be applauded, because I think that is the saving grace for South Africa. At the end of the day, these elections will be decided by the people of South Africa in a free, fair, and credible election. As much as some of the leaders may not like the result, in the past, those losers, those who lost the elections, did not like the result. But none of the losing candidates have ever said the elections were not free, fair, and credible. That is the beauty. How I wish Zimbabwe we could rise to that level. It is, of course, possible that we could rise to that level. Our biggest problem here has been that when we had the chance to implement the democratic reforms, we wasted it. The MDC had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. They failed to implement even one reform. Not even one token reform. And they've since been participating in these flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. It is a pity that the ordinary Zimbabweans themselves have been slow to realize what is going on here. They've been slow to realize that what we need is opposition leaders who will be committed, who are absolutely 100% committed to reforms so that we have free, fair, and credible elections. I believe that these elections in South Africa, much as none of us should not be seen to be campaigning for one part or the other, nonetheless, we in Zimbabwe, and I'm sure the rest in SADC, if not in the rest of Africa as well, would like to see South Africa holding another free, fair, and credible election process. And whichever government emerges, being the wish, the democratic wish of the people of South Africa. That will be ultimately the best thing that possibly happen to South Africa now, and to SADC as a whole, and to Africa as a whole. I would like to follow this discussion tomorrow with another commentary on one of the other institutions in South Africa, the police, and their role in delivering free, fair, and credible elections. I hope you'll be able to join me. I'll be on air tomorrow. It will be 9 o'clock UK time, and 10 o'clock Zimbabwean time. And I hope you'll be able to join me then. Thank you very much for listening, and good night.